welcome all of you. Continuing with the environmental impact assessment part. So, earlier we had studied what is EIA, what are the components of EIA, what are different notifications associated with EIA, and now we will be starting with EIA methods. And there are different types of methods that are used for conducting EIA of different projects. These are mostly like new projects, or it can be for some extension or modification of existing projects also. And out of different types of methods, we will look at ad hoc method in detail, followed by some examples associated with it. So, what are EIA methods? These are basically tools or procedures which are used to assess, quantify and interpret the environmental consequences of a proposed action. In other words, we can say these are some like mathematical, analytical, graphical or some kind of tools which can be used to estimate the impacts of whatever proposed activity we are going to take. It can be for an entire project. The entire project can be considered as one single activity, or one project can have multiple activities in it, and each of those activities can have some consequences on different components of environment. We have already seen like there are different components of environment. What are those? Like soil, water, air, and then there are biological components like biotic components. These are abiotic components. So, including climate, weather, precipitation, temperature. So, all these things which are different components of environment can get impacted. So, since these environmental components are the ones experiencing the impacts of proposed activity, it is necessary to do EIA, and depending on how much time we have, how much resources we have, what is the team and what is the purpose of that particular EIA. There are different methods out of which the project proposer or the company chooses the best one to conduct an EIA. So, basically these methods helps in analyzing the interactions between project activities and the environmental components. So, there are a number of types of methods: ad hoc, checklist, network, matrix methods, overlays, cost benefit analysis, environmental index using factor analysis. So, since there are so many types of methods, in this course we will restrict to first 4 types: the ad hoc, checklist, network and matrix. So, as the name indicates, you can see that it goes on adding the more layers of information and more details as we go from ad hoc to checklist to network and to matrix. Obviously, matrix will be something which will be dealing with numbers, the weightages, scaling and importance based matrices. So, starting with ad hoc method. The word ad hoc, what does it mean? It means like something to be done right now for a specific purpose or for this. It is a Latin word, the meaning of which is for this. So, whenever a EIA has to be done using ad hoc method, it will be basically based on the intuition of person who is doing it, the instincts, the experience or the expertise of the people involved in conducting that EIA. So, ad hoc method is one of the first types of EIA methods which project proponent usually goes for. It is easiest to use. It is easiest to use and preferred if we have short time and limited information. And using ad hoc method, the broad areas and the general nature of the likely impacts of the project or the project activities can be listed down. So, ad hoc methods do not structure the problem for a systematic analysis. It just gives us a preliminary assessment which helps to identify the most important areas, and those areas can be then assessed in detail for subsequent comprehensive EIA. So, you can say like ad hoc method are most commonly used for what type of EIA? The rapid EIA. If you remember, we had seen like there are 2 types of EIA, rapid and comprehensive, depending on like how much time and how much information we have. So, rapid one is typically like for a very short term. So, ad hoc methods can go fit well into the rapid EIA category. And when we list on the impacts, we can categorize them on the basis of different like criteria or different categorizing metrics. For example, impact can be positive and negative. Even before positive and negative, there is one thing: if there is an impact or there is no impact. Okay, so suppose there is an activity of say like construction of a road. Now, if construction of road is definitely going to impact the water, soil, air in the nearby areas, but is it going to impact like say socio-cultural interaction of people, or is it going to impact like transportation or the traffic congestion. So, some of the factors may be there which won't be impacted at all. So, in that case just having that tick mark whether it has an impact or whether it does not have an impact is also one of the base. And then once we know if there is any impact, whether that impact is positive or negative. Not every activity done by any company has only the negative impacts on environmental components. Okay. Some of the activities may have positive impact also. For example, if we construct a water tank, so it will cater to the needs of drinking for our society. So, that will have positive impact on satisfying thirst of the people. Okay. If we construct a aquaculture pond for safety or for growing fishes, that can also have positive impact on the economy and employment. Then impact can be categorized as short term or long term, depending on like how long of a duration that impact lasts. It can be short term or long term. For example, just like taking the example of that road construction, it may have a short term impact would be like some inconvenience to people with dust due to the construction activities, but once the road is there, the long term impact will be the improved infrastructure, the improved commute and transportation. Then high or low, medium. So, there are different bases where categorizing impacts is possible. Now, in ad hoc method also there are three common types of method: opinion poll, expert opinion and Delphi method. Let us go one by one quickly. So, opinion poll method, as the name suggests, you can see here people sitting here, two of them saying yes and one of them saying no. So, this is typically based on the group of people who may not be technical experts all the time, but they are definitely one of the stakeholders who has the knowledge associated with the project or who may get affected by that project activity. They may be inside the company, they may be outside the company in the nearby community, or they can be environmentalists, or they can be just people from places nearby. And so, they have to be stakeholders, because it does not make any sense to go and ask opinion of those people who are not at all related or concerned with a particular activity. So, it has to be through the stakeholders, and those stakeholders need not be technical experts all the time. So, the responses are typically obtained from the community, mainly the local residents, NGOs or local administrative officers, sometimes experts, and it most of the time it includes the local community perception. So, it is relatively quick and inexpensive. It does not take a lot of time and resources, and it is one of the first methods of ad hoc that people prefer to use for. So, it is called as opinion poll method. Second was expert opinion method. It is similar to the first method that we saw, that is opinion poll. The only difference is the word expert. So, it is also a common type of ad hoc EIA, and if we like as a scientist and technologist or people working in these areas, we would prefer to go with the expert opinion rather than the opinion of common stakeholders. So, this is the most common type of ad hoc EIA which is used, and it is based on the experience of experts, mainly the environmentalists, ecologists or planners, and a team of specialists from different fields related to an activity or a project. They gather together, they spend some time together, they list down all the questions, go take a survey, form opinion, and then prepare a document which can be submitted as a EIA report. Let us take one example for a construction of small hydropower plant. Now, hydropower plant, it is basically to convert the kinetic energy of flowing water into electricity, and it requires water reservoirs. So, it may involve construction of dams, it may involve shifting of people from one place to other, it may involve diversion of water, cutting down of trees. It will also involve like electricity generation, employment generation, all those aspects. So, when we have a team of experts from different fields, look at like how they can contribute to this EIA. So, if we have a hydrologist, they can talk about the impact on water quality and siltation. In this case, suppose there is a moderate impact because it is a small hydropower plant. So, there will not be lot of siltation. So, the moderate impact on the water quality. A ecologist will consider like because of that construction facility, the dust and all, how the vegetation got impacted. It is found that it is a negative impact. Sociologist will look at from the social perspective, and with the hydropower plant coming into the rural area or a remote area, the positive employment or the impact was high on the livelihoods of people nearby. So, overall analysis can be the moderate impact, but then when you list down the impacts as a team of experts, you need to come up with some recommendations how those impacts would be mitigated. So, moderate impact which will be acceptable with mitigation plan, that is a overall analysis. So, this is a simple example which we have taken here with only 3 experts. There is no limit on the number of experts in the team. You can have like 10, 20, 30, more the people, more the expert opinion, more like what we say clear the EIA report will be, and more unbiased the decision would be. The third method is Delphi method. Here again it deals with involving experts only, and there are several rounds of questionnaires. When the experts from a related field are consulted through a series of questionnaires, they are asked those questions again after giving them the feedback from other experts, and this questioning again and again and receiving the feedback from the group, it reduces the biasness and sometimes allows the experts to reconsider their opinions. So, there are several rounds until a common consensus is obtained or a stability is obtained in the responses of the entire group. So, overall this method would have higher credibility than the earlier 2 methods, but then it will need more time and it is resource consuming. As you can see in the pictorial representation, like the step 1, step 2, step 3. So, there is a feedback loop where the group feedback is sent back to the group so that experts get a chance to revise their answers and if they want to change their opinion. Okay. So, that is why this, when it goes in a feedback loop, it will take more time and it will take more resources, but it will have a higher credibility. So, these were the 3 types of ad hoc methods. Let us look at the drawbacks of overall. In general, like ad hoc methods have so many limitations. As you know, it is based on the intuition or the hunches or the expertise of few expert people without actually doing stringent measurements or like analysis or using mathematical tools. So, it is going to have several drawbacks. First drawback is there is no guarantee that it will cover all the essential effects or impacts, and because of different people involved in decision making, there is a lot of inconsistency also. When we try to do analysis by employing like different standards to assess different groupings of the factors given by different experts, there may be a scope of inconsistent decisions coming up. It is generally inefficient, and because of the limited data, limited time and limited resources. So, once this ad hoc EIA is used, it is always recommended to go for a more detailed EIA method so that we have a reliable EIA report. And then it has inherent subjectivity and biasness depending on the preferences of the experts or the stakeholders involved in the decision making when we are dealing with ad hoc EIA method. So, let us take one example, the same example which I conveyed earlier, the construction of small hydropower plant. It is just a representative image, and this example is based on the expert opinion method. Okay. So, what are the steps there? First, obviously, we will be forming a team of experts. There will be a hydrologist, geologist, environmental engineers, civil engineers. So, all those people would be included in the expert team. Then this team will collect all the information or visit to the site and collect some data based on which they can give their opinions. Once this site visit or data collection is done, then identification of major environmental components, the broad environmental components, so that we can list on the broader environmental impacts, air, water, land, flora, fauna, and once these are identified, you identify the impact level, whether it is low, medium, high, like we saw different bases on which these impacts can be categorized. So, accordingly we assess the impact level, and finally the team would prepare a report. So, if you have to represent the findings of ad hoc EIA method in the form of a table, typically environmental components would be listed down in the first column. It can be a component of the environment, or it can be the aspect or the feature of the environmental component, which will directly determine whether there is an impact or not, or the activity is going to affect what property of that environmental component. So, obviously it can affect the quality of air, quality of water, levels of noise. Okay, here soil is written, so it may be soil erosion or soil quality. Okay, so air, water, noise, soil, biodiversity, employment, local, and if you can see here, while conducting EIA of these projects, using these kind of methods. In addition to purely environmental components, we have some socio-cultural components also, which are directly associated or interrelated with environmental components in some sense. So, once these environmental components are listed down in the first column, in the subsequent columns you have impacts. Impact can be positive or negative, and magnitude can be low, medium or high. This is particularly for this example. Okay. So, if there is a construction of hydropower plant, during construction air quality is going to be affected negatively. The magnitude, it is given to be, let us assume it is medium impact. Similarly, water quality would be affected negatively, noise level would be there, soil would be impacted, biodiversity would be impacted negatively, and then some of those impacts are low, medium or some of them are high. But with the construction of hydropower plant, the other socio-cultural factors like employment, economy and power, they are impacted positively, and most of that impact is high or medium. And it is because of that the activity has been planned, right, to help country grow its economy, to generate employment, to provide access to energy, electricity and power to the rural areas or the remote areas. So, that was the intention behind having a hydropower plants. This is another way which can be used to represent the same thing. If you look at the color combinations, obviously green means positive, red means negative, you can give those labels in the legends, and this light brown, medium brown and dark brown represents the low, medium and high. It is just a different way of representing this table of ad hoc EIA method. You can have it like this, where you just tick mark, or sometimes people use cross and sometimes they use this. It does not matter what symbol you use, but please mention like denote in the legend what this symbol means. Let us take another example, construction project near a forest area. So, it can be construction of anything, mostly a road or something. This is taken from one of the literature studies, and as conveyed earlier, on the first column you have the environmental components like the wildlife, endangered species, vegetation, different types of vegetation, soil, drainage, noise. If you carefully look at this environmental area or the environmental components, in some examples or in some studies you will find them to be very broad, like just air, water, soil and flora and fauna or economy, employment. But it need not be necessarily like that. It can have like specific, if we have enough data or if there are some subsections of each environmental component, we can have that also. Like when we say fauna, so it can be wildlife, endangered species, some extinct species, native species. Okay. In vegetation, we can have natural or exotic vegetation. In soil, it can be soil erosion, soil characteristics, drainage, waste generation, underground water, surface water, noise. Okay. So, there is a different like environmental area which you can list down depending on the project. So, as you can see here in the subsequent columns, we are going to have the environmental impact. Now, both the examples, the one which we saw earlier for hydropower plant, we considered that entire project as one activity and listed down the impacts of that project on different components of environment. Okay. Similarly, here also we are considering the entire project as one activity and listing down the broad environmental impacts on the broad environmental components in the form of a table. So, one of the first basis which is used here is no effect, positive effect or negative effect. Okay. So, if there are some components which are not affected by the construction project, then we do not need to, we cannot highlight them as positive or negative, but out of those components of environment which gets affected, some of them are experiencing negative effect like the vegetation and wildlife and the noise, and some of them are like experiencing the positive effect like the groundwater. The effects can also, effects or impacts can also be categorized as beneficial, adverse or problematic. And because it is the ad hoc method that we are talking about, it is based on the intuition or the hunches of the team of stakeholders or experts, it may not have answer to each and every question at that moment. So, you can see some of the blocks, they are empty, even those having the environmental like the impacts, there it is difficult to categorize whether it is beneficial or adverse or problematic at that stage. Okay. But where it is possible to categorize, the team has categorized that for wildlife and natural vegetation it is a problematic impact. Similarly, in terms of duration, whether those impacts are short term or long term. Wherever it is possible to measure, like wildlife, it is short term, noise, it is a short term, there won't be any long term noise or sound pollution. But for other two, like natural vegetation and groundwater, the team was unable to identify or visualize whether the impact would be for short term or long term. So, it's left blank. So, similarly reversible and irreversible. Some of the impacts on some of the components may be reversible, some may be irreversible. Mostly in cases of like say biotic components, especially trees and vegetation, impacts can be reversible, because even though initially natural vegetation gets lost or they started declining in their productivity, some efforts, some mitigation measures can be put on to increase their vegetation back to its normal level. So, that impact is reversible. But suppose if the soil is damaged or the water channel is widened, then to make it narrow again, it will need substantially, it will be altogether a new project. So, those kind of impacts would be irreversible. So, these are some of the environmental areas. There are many more like surface paving, air quality, open spaces, health, safety, economic values, public facility and local plans. And on each of these environmental or socio-environmental components, the impacts are categorized. We will not go into detail of each and every tick arrow. You can, I think these slides would be shared with you. So, you can identify it yourself and understand, but this is how ad hoc EIA method is used. So, what is happening here? We have one full project which we take it as a single activity, and then we come up with a inference whether that is having impact on different components of environment or not. And in terms of details, we can add the category of those impacts, whether positive, negative, beneficial or adverse, long term, short term or reversible. There can be many more bases on which these categories could be generated. It all depends on the stakeholders or the team of experts who are doing that EIA. So, that was all about today's class. So, to summarize, we started with the definition and the meaning of what is EIA methods, like this is the tools to evaluate a project for its EIA, and there are different methods like 7-8 methods, out of which I think 4 or 5 we are going to cover in this course. And today we studied ad hoc method, which is the most easiest and most widely used, which is of 3 types if you remember: opinion poll, expert opinion, and third is Delphi method. Opinion poll, it is including the stakeholders, opinions of stakeholders. Expert, again it will be stakeholders, but the experts from different fields, and it is called as expert opinion method, most widely used because it will be more reliable. Delphi, it is based on a series of questionnaires and feedback mechanisms. It also involves experts, but it is very like time consuming, and it reduces the biasness and it reduces the inconsistencies. And then we checked the examples of ad hoc methods, different types like expert opinion mostly for hydropower construction plant, for a construction project in a tree in a forest, and we saw like different ways of representing the data obtained from this opinion poll or expert opinion or Delphi to represent in the form of a EIA report. So, with this we will stop here. Thank you.